Hello, Richard.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
I just want to double check a couple of my settings here. Okay.
Yes.
All right, that's good.
Good. It looks lovely and sunny also there in New York. Are you in New York?
I'm actually upstate. I'm in the Berkshires, which is directly north of New York by about 2.5 hours. It's Western Massachusetts. I have a house up here that's in the country. It's in the woods. So,
Wonderful. Well, I can see a little bit of greenery there in the
oh
corner of.
yes, there's lots of yeah. I'm literally in the forest.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Where were you born originally? Where are
I
you from?
was I was born in Jamaica in the West Indies. And
Okay.
I actually then went to England and I trained in England after Jamaica. And then I started working as a dancer in Europe. I was an apprentice with Northern Ballet Theatre in
Mm.
Manchester in England. And then I ended up moving back to Jamaica, finally ended up in the United States.
Oh, I see. Okay. So, and do you love nature? Is that why the choice to live there?
I do. The choice was a combination. It was the
Mm.
fact that my husband actually inherited the property, and then we decided that we would build a house here. So we've actually hammered and nailed and built this house over the last 12 years.
That's wonderful. That's
So
literally
yes,
building a little nest.
exactly. And I
But
have all the birds around envious of not being able to get inside.
oh, okay. Oh, but that's a wonderful project. I mean, that's and you know that you can build something that is yours and how you like it and so.
Yeah, and I think as with everything, you know, you're teaching yourself as you go, and we have the
Mm.
advantage of the internet, and so checking
Yeah,
everything on YouTube. How do I do the plumbing? How do I do this?
yeah.
So you learn to love the imperfections.
Exactly, exactly. Oh, this is so wonderful that you say that.
It's exactly as you did it, and yes, it is what you
Yeah, yeah.
want, but it comes with those
Perfect.
imperfections.
Yeah, perfectly imperfect.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. But you know, this is what I think about sometimes is that, and especially now in this time where we are basically, all at home and or not doing really what the everyday thing and working towards something, but that I wonder sometimes if this extreme strive for perfection prevents many people from actually attempting something, that it feels so big and huge that it's that they just don't do it.
I think that, it is daunting. I worked for Paul Taylor for 15 years, and while I was dancing in the company, I started staging his work, going to other places. But I also was involved with the creation of 22 original works.
Mm.
And in talking to Paul, we used to discuss about how terrifying it is to walk into that studio that very first day when you're creating a new work, and the thought of all these people looking at you expecting something. And I think that to be a creative artist takes an enormous amount of courage.
Mm.
You're looking at that blank page, you're looking at that giant score, you're looking at just how do I fulfill the expectations of both myself
Mm.
and the artist that I'm working with.
Yeah. Well, that's so true. I think, well, I can just imagine, what you're saying, that also that faith in what your idea is, or what how you see it, that think how other people will also get it and uh, do it, the way you see it.
Yeah, and I think that especially in this period of time, I've had a lot of opportunity to reflect, but also to recognize that I'm losing that practice of being courageous and stepping into a studio and working with other people. I think that's another aspect of it, that especially working in the field of dance, it is about the interaction, both for the dancer ultimately to perform for an
Mm,
audience, where they're getting feedback, immediate feedback from the audience. I've done film work, and it's very different to perform for camera than it is to perform for live audience. But more than that, learning to communicate through movement uh, is about how do you see movement and receive it and interpret it. And that's very difficult to do remotely. Like, it's almost impossible. and
mm,
and I've actually had lots of time to reflect on when I can't get into a studio and like work with dancers, all of the nonverbal communication that goes on. I can tell if they've had a good day or a bad day, or whether or not they're feeling enthusiastic, or do I have to do something different. Those cues come from interacting with people, not just in one focused little frame like we have here,
mm.
but you know with an
Yeah.
actual person in the room.
Yeah, and this is also what I'm talking to, and this is, well, one of the reasons why I talk to so many dancers uh, about their experience during lockdown, because I believe that they had a different experience to, for example, a musician who had uh, his instrument separate from him,
Right.
um, and where dancers, their bodies are their instruments, and the effect that this uh, period where they weren't able to dance and be in a studio, and like you say, this interaction, because I think a lot uh, of dancing has to do with the interaction between the dancers as well. And it's very interesting to hearing from you the same thing, this energy, talking about this energy.
Yeah, and I would say that the other thing that dance sort of really requires is
Mm.
space. And what
Yeah.
we have discovered in, saying, oh, well, we're going to offer them the opportunity to train in their homes,
Mm.
we don't leave enough room in our homes to move the way that you have that
Mm.
freedom in a studio. And the capacity to be outdoors and to run and to have space. Um, Studios, it's such a great privilege as dancers to have that much open, clear space. I used to laugh because I would go outside a lot of the time when I was training, and I was so used to like an open, flat surface that I would trip on the street because there was a pebble there, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
was like, I just wasn't used to like having obstacles in the way of where
Yeah.
I was running.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine. Yeah, but and the other thing that I've heard some also say, some of the dancers, that these Zoom classes that they did, and in the first lockdown, um, when the person giving the Zoom class is in a very huge space and or a very huge living room, and they are stuck in a small little space, so this visually, that didn't sit well with them, then you know seeing where what my surrounding is, and the person giving the Zoom class, the surrounding.
Yeah, when I was teaching some Zoom classes, I actually took a carpet that was 6 feet by 9 feet, sort of 3 meters by 2.5 meters, and I used that as my floor, so that
Mm.
when I was teaching I could feel the same restrictions that my students were having.
mm,
But I will say that, ultimately, I did not enjoy the experience of learning to teach by Zoom.
yeah.
It's like I miss the you're dealing with different factors.
Mm,
One, camera angle, and two, sound delay, the lag that happens because of computers and internet, sound quality. And then even working with live musicians who were also in a separate place, like getting getting it to sync was much harder. The subtleties of what makes dancing so lovely is its sense of rhythm or musicality or just interaction beyond the technique. And then,
mm.
as I said before, eating up space, the joy of running, the joy of jumping, the joy of turning and spinning and not tripping over pebbles.
Yeah. And hanging onto a chair for dear life when you're
I
doing
know
ballet.
you pick up the chair.
But what I also think about is the changes in the bodies, because of course with ballet they train since a very young age, and then it's almost continuous, with a break maybe over the summer, but for a few weeks, but then getting back to it, and I think about how that affects them as well in their movement now when they're back in the studio, or because rehearsals are not it's not the same as it was before, the amount of time that they're now dancing. So could you yourself feel it?
Absolutely.
Mm,
Absolutely. I teach in a conservatory program, and we were very fortunate here in the United States. We shut down a year ago, and it was only just, earlier this year, a few months ago, that we were able to start really vaccinating everybody. But we stayed shut down. We didn't really attempt to reopen, and certainly New York City, where I'm based, you know, we attempted to go into the studios in very tiny numbers, uh, just because it was so necessary for the dancers to get the idea of their own bodies, how it transfers weight. And when you're in
oh
a
yes.
tiny little space where you take one step and you can't go any further, you can't get used to that transference of weight, and you can't build stamina. Um, you know, you don't become a marathon runner by running short sprints multiple
Yeah.
times.
Mm,
You've just got to do it. And that certainly, even as I was teaching on Zoom, and then 3 months later was able to see students in the room, the progress that they made with being in the room was 20 times more
really.
than what
Mm,
we could do online. And I
mm,
think online is great if you have some understanding and knowledge within your body that you can draw on. And I think of video, where watching a video of a live performance is so much more impactful if you saw the live performance, because it brings you
yeah.
back to
Yeah.
that experience.
Mm,
But on its own, it isn't a
mm,
transformative experience in the same way, you know. And so I think that video actually is sort of a reflection of
mm,
what you experience interactively in person. and
mm,
and the dancers miss that, and the teachers miss that by
mm,
by being separated. um and once you start it, you can just keep going, and you keep going, and you build the stamina and the strength to really enjoy it. I think that's what classes and rehearsals are for.
mm.
Keep trying it. That's why we call it repetition. Keep
Yeah.
trying it until you don't have to think about it, and that it just simply becomes an expression of your pathos or your joy or your individuality or whatever the artistic vision is.
And also about the filming, that I think from an audience perspective, um, when something is filmed, it's really seen, it's really showing what the camera is showing us, and it's not like sitting in the chair and having the freedom to look where you want to look. So basically we are then seeing the performance from the perspective of what the camera is showing us, you know, the close-up shots or the focus shots. And so I think this is true what you're saying. I haven't thought of that as well, that you have to see the performance first yourself to be able to enjoy it then on video, because then your mind, then you already have that spatial awareness yourself from what is going on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the film, if you have a good director, it's still going to be him directing your focus to
Mm,
zoom in on certain aspects of what's going on. But our human eye is just so, and our brains are so finely attuned that I can look out at, an open field and I can zoom in on this tiny little bird in a way that I can't get a camera to do.
yeah.
And it's like I can
Mm,
watch them fly across the sky and that may catch my eye. Oh, there's this gorgeous yellow leaf that's still just perched on the edge of a limb or the ice on
yeah.
the lake. And you can, from 50 yards away, zoom in on really tiny things. But that's your choice. That's your choice as an
Mm,
individual
yeah.
audience member. And
Mm.
that's not the same when you look at a video.
Exactly, yeah. And another thing that I spoke to a choreographer as well recently, who mentioned that the performances, the live performances, really push physically the dancers to a different level than they do when they are in a rehearsal. And this is something that even in I think with live streaming, when they just do a video, that they don't get that energy from the audience, because it's that, like he said, it's that energy that pushes them to, you know, do the jump a little bit higher, or physically just push themselves that little bit more.
As a coach and you know and a teacher, it's always interesting when you bring someone that the dancers don't know into the room, just
Mm,
one person, and then you multiply that idea with a whole audience. And I think there is a dancer's sense of imperative to be their best, and the more eyes that are on them, they know I've got this one opportunity to make that first impression. So I think it also feeds their sense of accomplishment as
mm,
much as it produces a conversation with the audience, whether or not I'm the audience as their teacher or coach, or whether or not it's a larger audience, you really are conversing as a performer. And I think that is the distinction of live performance.
mm.
Like, I know that culturally, when I've danced works that may be very funny in one culture, and then you go to a different culture and they're not laughing, you're kind of
Yeah.
wondering what's going on. Like, why did this joke land so flat?
Yeah.
But that's part of the interaction,
Yeah.
and you
Mm,
start to be the creative artist to say, well, what does this audience want from me within the framework of my choreography? You can't just change the
yeah.
choreography, but you do everything you can as a performer to draw in the audience and interact with them. And you know that your reaction, just things like the quiet in the room, when you know that you have their attention, and no one's
Yeah.
moving in their seat, and you just can feel that. And I that's almost impossible to do across a video camera.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. But I mean, this is the same as we say, you know, from the audience side. And I also, when I listen to how the dancers talk about this energy and about this, and also the musicians, you know, that they really miss that. Um, that I think it's also the same from the audience point of view, that they miss this live performance, this, you know, um, being there. And you talked about the imperfections, but um, I believe, and this is what everybody's telling me, that not one performance is exactly the same. So even if you go and see all three, it will be different because of, you know, just little things happening on stage.
Well, it's as much the interaction of the dancers with each other as well as with the
Yeah.
audience, and dancing and playing music in an orchestra, being a part of production, it's all a communal activity.
Mm.
Nothing happens discreetly just by themselves. All of these things have to coordinate. And yeah, I will say, when I was a performer, I think some of my most memorable performances were the ones where accidents happened, where mistakes happened,
Okay.
where it's like you
Yeah.
slipped or you ran into a boom or you
Yeah.
you did something weird, and like the recovery of it, and how people around you interacted made you feel like it was just so alive and so immediate. And the things that, you I think being in the pandemic for me has taught me a different sense of patience, but has not taken away my desire for immediate feedback and interaction. Talking with people. I have 4 cats, and just interacting as they change their moods from day to day. Uh, but I've learned to be more patient, that it will come back, that there are
Mm.
times where we will get there, and I will be back in a studio. I will be, out in the world again.
Mm.
Um, but it definitely has tested my ability to understand patience.
Really? But did you also feel at times in the beginning, because this is what also a lot of artists say, you know, that wondering and this uncertainty, will things go back to normal? How will I be able to do this again? Or you know, the security of jobs and so on. So did that also cross your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think philosophically for me, I work as a freelancer. And so I often am looking at my schedule 1, 2, 3 years down the road. And so, yes, I lost a year of work, and then everything there got pushed, 3, 4, possibly 5 years down the road. And I don't know if I'm going to physically have the energy to sustain, for
Mm.
what I do 5 years down the road. But you plan for it. Uh, at the same time, I think I philosophically shifted to not expecting to return to what I considered normal, but that we were going to have to learn what is a new normal,
Mm.
what, how much of what we're doing, which is why I started teaching Zoom classes, to see if that was a kind of normal that was going to be okay for me.
Mm.
And if not, how am I going to shift? How am I going to turn and make it something that I will do? Because I don't think it's going to go away. I think that there's certain benefits that have come, which is I now can be seen globally. And I find it interesting when you're trying to watch something online and it says, this is not available in your region. But
Mm.
so much of what we're taking advantage of here is that globally I'm interacting with students that I had in India or in Australia,
Mm.
which I wouldn't ever have thought to do. And I think that's going to become a part of what I call the new normal.
Yeah. But even you and I talking now,
Yeah,
this is something that uh, we never thought that this would be even possible to do. And well, we've got something to talk about, but I mean, this is as if the distance, the physical distance for me has brought us in different ways closer together, because now we're doing things like this,
right.
and taking the time to do things like this and talking about it. And I think that talking about it is also very important, because I think this is the way to plant seeds and to uh, you know this is also something that I want to ask you, and this is, a lot of artists talk about their value, or the value of the arts, and the arts are seen as entertainment. So this is why the theaters are not open, because it's not a necessity. um, Yet artists feel this is their lives, and this is their work, and it's for them important. And of course, I think most of the audiences realize that it is very important, because it's for our well-being as well. I mean, we listen to music, we watch television, so this is all part of the art, and this is what we use to get us through this time. But I was wondering if in future now, if artists should not be talking more about the art, like you and I are talking now, that you talk about what it feels like to be on stage, and this energy, and about the art and about the works, so that it's not just the dancers or the die-hard ballet fans that know about these works that you are creating and teaching, but that in a way attracting new audiences to educate them, um, by using, say, online platforms to do that.
Yes, I do think that I had a friend who was not a theater person who loved to go to the theater. And I remember once inviting him to come backstage. And he said, I don't want to go backstage. I love the magic, the
Oh yeah,
illusion. I
yeah.
don't want you to break that for me. Yet at the same time, I think when we have these old tropes of butcher, baker, candlestick maker, we understand how that applies to our interaction in life.
Mm,
We get our meat, we get our bread, we get light. Um, and it is easy for the general consumer to forget that when you binge watch a TV series, that those are artists, those are actors, those are musicians who are playing the background score. They've trained to interact. And what you love about epics is that you can be involved in the middle of this giant war, but you don't have to go to war, but there are actual people who are doing that. Um, the 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 capacity to think of how we produce exceptional artistry in entertainment,
mm,
um, movement. Dancers are such elite movers, but it's amazing how many actors have to take movement. And then when you see it online, you can really see the difference between these elite dancers who this is what they do every day of their life. I really do agree that that conversation, I think, has expanded.
mm.
More and more I'm seeing uh, just people doing exercises in their living room, but watching professional dancers helping them out, and then being so thrilled at them showing a performance or saying, "Hey, I'm going to be on stage and come and
Yeah.
see me in the theater."
Mm,
I do think that this is shifting slightly, and
mm,
I I was so happy to actually talk to you a little bit because
mm.
this is a further opportunity to help educate people that this is the reality.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is what we do for a living. It's not a hobby.
exactly. And this is why I'm talking to the artists as well, because I had an insight by when I took all these photographs by talking to artists, and I actually learned things that I never realized. I mean, I have a little bit of an insight in the ballet world, but not in the music world.
Right.
And by talking to conductors, for example, it's opened my eyes to so much more. And I know a lot of artists say it takes away the magic if you say too much, but for me, actually, it made me more inquisitive. It made me more wanting to see a live performance, because now I have a little bit of a background to what goes on, and it uh, I, I don't think it will take away the magic, because you still, I mean, I go and watch many times backstage, but still when I sit in the audience, it's still different, it's still different to see a performance then.
I
But
think that I think that knowledge um, adds to appreciation. You know,
exactly, yeah.
I definitely see that as being something where I grew up in a country that you would never conceive of dancing for a living. It's
Mm,
just like it wasn't. We had a dance company, but every dancer in that company had a day job. They were
mm,
bankers and doctors and lawyers, and they danced because they loved it, and they would put on performances. And then I ended up in the profession, and the more that I learned about the profession, and I learned about the different things that you do in this profession, uh, just the more fascinating it became for me. I think knowledge does increase appreciation um, for
definitely.
most people.
Mm. Because I think especially ballet has these people have these preconceived ideas, so they, if you talk about ballet, the first thing they think is tutu, and then
Right.
they think Swan Lake, and it's these very typical things. But what I think of is, well, there are so many beautiful ballets, so many beautiful new creations, and um, if the dancers even talk about how they work towards doing this, or how they feel dancing this piece or this role, also, this would be very interesting to know, because I spoke sometimes a musician would tell me something about Beethoven and what he loves about the music of playing Beethoven, and by telling me this, suddenly it's like you say, it's an education. uh, Now I am also more interested in hearing this in Beethoven's music, because now I know what to listen to. And I think it's the same in dance, if the dancers start talking about the all the different ballets more, people might also have a different idea, not just think Swan Lake when they hear ballet.
I think that all of the arts, um, if you look at it like a library, you walk into a library and you choose a book. That book is going to reflect a specific idea. What's the thesis behind that book? Whether or not it's love, or, angst, or resilience, and the great thing about art, if you think about painters, you know, they don't paint all the millions of leaves that are on the trees to give you the impression of the forest.
Yes.
They pare it down to the
Mm.
specifics that will communicate that idea. Dance has that myriad sense of poetry, that it is talking about many aspects of our life, and each individual work, scene, act, dance can represent just one aspect of it. And so understanding that dance is not just one thing. but
Mm.
it is about communicating our human condition, our human aspirations, our struggles, as much as it is the beauty and excellence of what the human body can achieve. And there's something exemplary about it, where we're putting it into a focused idea, not just a competition. I think we
Yeah.
love sports because we see the capacity of the human body
Mm.
and working in a team. But what makes dance an art is we're taking that human capacity and trying to communicate an idea,
Mm.
which represents, some days I feel like laughing and some days I feel like crying,
Yeah.
and that art can maybe bring me to a happier place or help me reflect on things that aren't so easy.
Yeah, and I think also in the state you're in, like you say, in also the mindset you're in, it will affect you in a different way, or you will see it in a different way. So if you see it now, and if you see it in 5 years' time, maybe it's then a different, because you're in a different time in your life. I'm talking from an audience point of view.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So
you
it
know
will.
i That's why I draw the analogy to books,
Yeah, yeah.
because I've reread books that I read when I was a teenager. And
Mm,
as an older person with more experience, I see it so differently. I read it so differently. And
mm,
dance is the same thing. What's so great about dance for me, though, is we also, what's reflected on the stage is your contemporary environment. These are
mm,
people that you can run into on the street, and that's changed over the years.
mm.
What their abilities are, what their style is, what the costume designers have chosen. um, I love the fact that, I talk to fashion designers talking about the retro style and how are they putting a contemporary twist on a 1960s go-go boot.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
It's,
yeah, yeah,
it's like conceptually,
yeah,
that's what's keeping it alive.
yeah.
And this period of time, I think, has certainly made me reflect on legacy, because I
Mm,
am someone who worked for a choreographer who passed away a few years ago. And now I become responsible to wonder, what is the applicability of legacy of an artist who is no longer with us? And we have many examples of how their work has translated to new generations of dancers and new audiences, and mean something to them, which may not necessarily have been the same thing when pieces were created, but
mm,
it still means something to them. It still communicates something about the audience's experience or their mood or condition.
mm,
And you know, we have evidence that certain novels are timeless. I think we have evidence that there are dances that are timeless,
mm.
right? Based on who's performing it and based what the audience gets from it.
Yeah. And when you teach, these choreographies, do you um, verbally say what needs to be shown, or is it all in the movement, or is
Well,
it
I
all depending
teach,
on the dancer?
it's a combination. I
Mm,
think that for me, when I walk into a studio, the dancers mostly have never experienced my choreographer, right? So they don't know, and so it's going to be a brand new work. And what was so wonderful about the choreographer I worked for was his idea that his craft is creating movement and patterns and choreography that can withstand the interpretation of many different people. So
uh,
I'm looking for them as individuals to take the movement that I give them, and my practice has to be to see what is it that keeps it true to the choreographer's vision, and at the same time bring out that unique individual that's there. And it's a combination because I'm not using a set vocabulary. We're actually creating new vocabulary. It's almost like sign language,
Mm,
where I do feel like I have to physically illustrate it and then verbally push the dancers to expand upon it. So
I
so
see.
you
Yeah.
know, we can say, walk down the street, now walk like you're late for an appointment.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You know,
Understand.
so it's not just the walking part of it, it's actually the intent behind it. And I do find that fascinating. I find it fascinating the multiple ways that people can interpret it, and then keeping that difference and individuality while
Mm,
also bringing them together so that you understand they all belong in the same culture, same world, same environment that you're creating in a dance.
mm. That is wonderful that it's created that way, that it's not literally this has to be this way, but that they have this freedom as artists also,
I'm
the
going to get in
dance.
trouble for saying this, but
Mm,
ultimately, I believe that the genius of dance works in particular is not the individual steps. I
mm,
think it's the capacity for the choreography, the structure, and the steps to allow dancers to communicate.
mm,
And so ultimately we look at, you know, Black Swan doing 32 fouettes. Well, some people are doing doubles, some people are doing triples, some people are going across the music, some people are with the music, but we accept those differences and then we look at the context of it and find out whether or not that brings a sense of change, transportation out of the theater,
yeah.
in that
Mm,
moment.
mm. But Richard, also something that I talk about to the artists are about educating in schools, about the education of art. And I know I've heard in America it depends on where you are, and uh, it's so different. Different schools have different approaches to art. But I'm thinking overall. Don't you think it is a time now that we start thinking of making art education compulsory in schools? Um, because if I just think of the conversation we're having now and the things you're talking about, I can just imagine as a child what great advantage dance would have for a child's development. And this also includes music and visual arts. And and I wonder if this pandemic, the highlight that there is on the arts at the moment, if this is not the time that we start talking about how important education is for children.
I seriously wish that um, I could say in the US, I felt like there was more of a focus on the arts.
Mm,
I entirely agree with you. I think that the arts and movement, so the research in education has proven that getting kids to be physically active helps with their intellectual capacity and their
mm,
learning abilities. And it helps with problem solving. How do I go around an obstacle? What is my physical capability to crawl underneath something and then get up over something? And it's not just a sport, it's actually about applying it, problem solving. These are things that American higher education often pushes, but I find that I wish the conversation was definitely more that you can build these skills in children, and you have a structure that you can do it through music,
mm,
through visual art, and through physical activity, where they're also learning it's not just about being better than the next person, but
yeah.
it's about working with someone else towards
Mm,
an end. You know, school and education shouldn't always be about being the best. It
Mm.
should be about learning to learn to be in the world, learn to address all the problems that you're going to face as you grow up and, have to pay bills and,
Yeah.
how do I fix a broken pipe?
Yeah.
And we get this from the arts because the arts are about finding a creative way to live in the world.
Yeah. 100% agree, and I think also younger children, because like you say now, in secondary education, there is maybe, children can go to art schools, or they can make the choice and go to art school at the age of what, 14, 15.
12, yeah.
But yeah, but I think it's so important that entering school and kindergarten, that they're already there, start uh, you know having these experiences, and also, for children to express themselves.
Absolutely. I think it's a practice. Like I said, what we've lost in this pandemic as movers is that practice of moving, of being more interactive and being outside. And when you live in a city, I have the great fortune to be able to be in the country,
Mm.
but it's hard. It was harder to get outside when everything's locked down and you have curfew and you can't go anywhere and you're stuck only in your apartment. Um, it's a practice. And, we know that children learn their language skills in the first 5 years of life.
Yeah.
Why are we not addressing what is education for the youngest of our children? Because if their practice is to be coordinated, is to have an ear for sounds and music, and is to be able to write and express themselves in different ways, by the time they get to secondary education, they will have a better basis upon which to
Exactly.
make
Yeah.
choices.
Mm. And I mean, this is not saying that everybody has to become an artist, but like you say, it will give them the advantage when learning, having to study, say, maths and science, and so that they have all these skills. Yeah.
As much as we think about we revere great writers and scientists, all the research people who have come up with vaccines. They are the best in their class. The thing
Yeah.
that we can appreciate about professional dancers is that they are the best in their class.
Mm.
But all of those doctors and scientists and economists and philosophers went to school with people who have regular jobs, who may
Yeah.
not be revered, and they are a part of that. But out of that comes these exceptional elite people. And I don't think of elitism in that respect as a bad thing. I
Yeah.
think that shows us the capacity of what is possible.
Yeah.
um but I still have to go and do groceries and do my cooking and wash my clothes just
Yeah.
like anybody else.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, this is what the conductor also said to me, is that people don't also realize this, that his car can break down and he has to do the washing, and yeah.
And we make mistakes of like,
Yeah.
oops. Yes, the perfect imperfections.
Exactly. The normalities. But yeah, so yeah, this is really, I hope, and this is why I think the more we speak about this, about the education, this is also what I believe. If we just plant seeds and talk about that and think about that, then maybe we create a lovely energy wave, and some people will start listening.
I think the current is always there, and then
Yeah.
sometimes the wave just picks it up, and you know I I also do my best,
Mm.
as an individual. I constantly am working on outreach programs and wanting to not only work with elite dancers and professionals and those that aspire to it, but I love going into primary schools and going into areas
Wonderful.
that, you
Yeah.
know, so and I use dance as a means of communicating,
Mm.
so I love being able to go back and think of traveling the world again and
Yeah.
being in countries like India and having that opportunity uh, to both experience their culture but to also to learn from the children. How are they seeing the world and seeing what possibilities they have?
Mm.
um,
I I I think I personally think that the the core or the essence of an artist is that part that they started, where they start falling in love with their art, that child at the age of 4 or 5 that suddenly had the interest in dancing or so. And I think that comes then naturally from them, you know. And uh, although the education and all the experience builds upon that and makes it then growing as an artist. But I do think that that first little uh, igniting the light, I
yeah,
think that that is almost that part of the artist that that's always the most natural part because it came from them. And I do think, I think about, say, children, like you say, there are children living in say remote towns or where they don't get to a theater or where there's not a possibility to do play an instrument or so. And I almost think that if schools can provide this education, then at least they have this experience and they have this ability to try and do something or to just have that experience. But it's artists like yourself that you say now that doing these outreach programs, because you are the ones with the who understand what this art is all about. And the way you talk to me, for example, is wonderful because you give me a different perspective also on that. And the artists are the people to ignite this spark in the children, like you say, in this outreach program, because you know what to do, you know what to teach them or to talk to them about. So it's
I
wonderful that you do that. Yeah.
I will say one of my favorite childhood memories and
Mm.
experiences was I was about 7 years old. And in Jamaica, there was a program where children that showed talent were brought to a separate after school program. And then those children would perform in
Mm.
different schools. Like, so we had a violinist, a young girl, and her teacher came and played Bach's double violin concerto, the adagio movement from it, um, during lunchtime. And I was like 7 years old, and just seeing the ability of this young girl who was a little bit older than I was, able to produce that kind of music with an instrument that I knew what it was, but I'd never heard it.
Yeah.
To encounter that in person, I was never someone who aspired to become like an adult.
Mm.
I always looked at my peers. And so I was just fascinated to see another child be able to reach that level of accomplishment.
Mm.
Um, that's a program that I've always sort of hope and aspire to at some point to
Mm.
start to generate again, where we do lunchtime performances in schools with children of their own age or maybe just a little older,
Wonderful.
because
Yeah.
that capacity to see what's possible you know,
Mm.
I think as a child, you think of adults as a very different race. It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
what are those? You
yeah.
know, but when you see
A child.
people,
Yeah,
a child like yourself
yeah.
doing art, you know,
Mm,
to me, that was transformative.
mm.
That to me made it possible for me to imagine, oh, I could actually want
You-
to do that.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, that's actually true what you're saying. That the child can relate to another child. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone's different. That was
Yeah.
my turning point, you know, was
Yeah.
just seeing a child create art.
Mm, mm.
Um, you know, I know there are many people who say, you know, their turning point was going to see a performance of Sleeping Beauty, you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
and and yet I didn't have access to that. So
Mm,
what I did have access to was the exposure to to music in that way.
mm.
So I do feel I agree with you entirely. It is
Mm.
exposure, it is access.
Exactly.
If they
Yeah.
can't take them to a theater because they live in a small rural town where nothing's coming through, allow their arts community to be involved with
Exactly. Yeah.
exemplifying that
Yeah.
possibility.
Yeah. I live on the on cloud nine, so I think it's possible.
Yeah.
I think it's possible that we
I live in perpetual hope.
I believe that will one day happen, that every child will be able to do art in school. I think that would be wonderful. Yeah.
I think it's definitely the thing that I often push for, you know, and
Mm,
I aspire to at least offer some exposure if possible.
wonderful. Richard, on a lighter note, did you do
Mhm.
something very interesting or not very interesting? Did you do something in lockdown that you've never done before?
Huh.
Did
Um,
you have time to just explore? Well, even if you just went for a walk, that's also.
you know, one of the things is, so I have this house up here in the
Mm,
Berkshires in the forest, and I always used to come up here on the weekends because I was always working in the city. So the fascinating thing for me was actually was to explore like
mm,
this area that has so much nature to it just on a walk. But I think more than that, I always used to love to cook, and I never had time to experiment and come up with
oh,
my
okay.
own recipes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And all of a sudden it was like, you know, I've been cooking nonstop in my own kitchen for a year,
Really?
and I've enjoyed the experience of
Mm,
exploring different flavor combinations, using different herbs, trying out different proteins. You know,
mm,
I just never gave myself enough time to explore
to do
cooking
it.
for myself.
Yeah.
And I would say, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. It's like, you know, cooking,
Really?
baking. Yeah.
And what's your favorite signature dish?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I've come up with my own version of lasagna that
Okay.
I love
Yeah.
to do, and I love the fact that it takes so much time. You know, I
Oh, I
prepare
see.
my ragu sauce separately. I get sausage and meat and mushrooms, and I
Mm,
add that together, and then I have my own mixture of cheeses that I bring together
mm.
and put it into a bechamel sauce, and then, you know, I layer it,
Wow.
and I take, you know, 4 or 5 hours to prepare my
Mm.
lasagnas. And I love the process. And then the
Okay.
fact that I can, like, you know, cut it up and have, you know, extra pieces in the freezer that I can then
Oh,
just
yeah, yeah,
warm
yeah.
up when I don't want to cook, is great. It's great to
It's
have that.
wonderful. Yeah.
And you know, and I love making pies. I love sort of
Oh, okay.
the
Yeah.
idea of creating a crust,
Yeah.
and different kinds of fillings and things like that. So,
Mm.
yeah, I would say lasagna, salad, and pie.
Oh, okay. Oh, that lasagna sounds amazing. I mean, mine is always so quick and but yeah, I know the real original one takes that amount of time. if you really make the proper one. Mm.
And again, because I have the time in lockdown, I figured, well, why am I rushing?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I think. I think we've all, in a way, did everything a little bit slower. Like
Yeah,
just even walks and even going to the supermarket, because at one point going to the supermarket was
that
really
was a great
the
outing.
outing.
I used to laugh. A friend of mine sent me a little cartoon that says, we've learned to become like our pets, like our dogs. It's like,
Yeah,
we get so excited to go outside and go in the car, you know?
that's true. Yeah, no, that's
Oh, look, we're going for a walk.
and that usually is planned ahead. That's
Right.
sort of, yeah. I know. I live with my son, and we used to, oh, so okay, we'll go to the supermarket tomorrow. Like it was this big thing that we do.
No,
But
absolutely. I mean, through
yeah,
lockdown, we had this situation where seniors, people
mm,
more at risk, were actually able to go to the supermarkets early in the morning,
I see.
before the rest of the general
Yeah,
public were allowed in. And
mm,
so, like, you would need to plan it, you would need to do those things. And
yeah.
then when I was taking seniors to go to the supermarket, I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning so that we could then
Wow.
go very early and then come back. And yeah, everything became scheduled in a different
Yeah.
kind of way.
All the mundane things got scheduled.
I know they suddenly became the most important thing in your
Yeah,
day. It's like,
yeah,
oh, it's laundry day.
yeah. Oh, wonderful. But Richard, tell me now, this is the last question for you. What is your wish for when this is all over?
My wish for when this is all over has something to do with what I feel has been brought to the fore because people have had time to share on social media, to look at news, where, especially in the United States, they've become very aware of sexism and social consciousness and
Oh, yeah.
culturalism and racism and these types of things. And I actually think that is a function of the pandemic because people have time where they're not just rushing to their jobs, but they're looking at these issues. So my hope at the end of this is that we really come sort of as a world culture to an understanding that multiculturalism and societal acceptance is not about differentiating the different places where people come from, but
Yeah,
it is learning to see the individual that's in front of you. And I say that as I identify as Jamaican, but no one looking at me would ever imagine that I'm Jamaican.
mm,
Um, they see the heritage, genetic heritage of my grandparents,
mm,
but I did not grow up,
mm,
in China from where my grandparents are. And if I talk in a normal accent, this is how I sound because this is where I grew up. So I sound like a West Indian. And
yes,
it's just very interesting to encounter strangers,
mm,
um, not accepting me as an individual, but only looking at what I am
mm,
as they see it visually. So that's my hope at the end of this pandemic is that when we start interacting, that we really take into consideration everyone we meet on the street is an individual that has a life and, you know, connections and caring and wish to contribute to society.
exactly. Yeah. No, it's true. And this is where I think the arts are very important, because in the arts, uh, that you know, you look at in ballet companies, you look at orchestras, people come from, if I just think of this project that I've done, how many people come from all over, you know,
over.
from Mexico, from Bulgaria, from Russia, from England, all over, and they are all musicians, they are all artists, they are all together, really working together, and if society could be like that, you know, if
Yes.
that could be the model for society, that people work together because of this uh, thing that they have in common, you know, the art that they have in common, that would be so wonderful. Yeah.
What I loved about dance when I started to look at the arts, I early on wanted to do theater, I wanted to do drama. Um, but coming from where I was and then training in England, I thought dance was one of the first places where visually you could do what we used to call non-traditional casting.
Mm.
All of a sudden we were seeing, dancers of different color, doing roles that maybe traditionally a less, in a more sort of um, culturally established environment,
Mm.
it was difficult for dancers of color.
Mm.
But it was one of the first areas for me in my experience where I was seeing the possibility of not
Yeah.
being cast as a Chinese person. And I couldn't do it verbally because I
Yeah.
didn't sound Chinese. And
Yeah.
so the disconnect for people to see an actor who looked Chinese but sounded like a West Indian
Mm.
would have been a very specific role.
Oh
But
yeah.
in dance, I
It
could
wasn't.
be
Yeah.
anybody,
Yeah.
I could be an
Yeah.
abstract idea. So for me, dance became
Mm.
my preferred direction
Mm.
for performing.
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, that you see it that way.
Yeah. And,
Experience it that way.
yeah. And, again, I think it's a generational thing.
Yeah.
I did not look for
Mm.
role models of other people that looked like me,
Yeah.
and that just wasn't my experience.
Mm.
And at the same time, I knew I was always going to be the minority because I was coming from a developing country,
Mm.
and then training in a first world country. So
Yeah.
that was a very different experience. And so
Mm.
that immigrant experience, and the advantage you have of being the minority is that you don't look at yourself as often. You look at everyone else around you. And I
Yeah.
never realized, growing up in Jamaica, I always
Mm.
saw everyone, primarily Afro Caribbean,
Yeah.
of African descent, dark skin. So I never thought that I looked different.
Mm.
Because all my friends and everything else, I just never thought that I looked different in a sort of distinctive way. Um, and it was very interesting when I left Jamaica that
Mm.
everyone wanted to know how come there were Chinese in the West Indies, and I had to
Really?
learn about my history.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
of a sudden, it's like I'm doing all of this research and finding about how my family got there and what they
Yeah.
did in the West Indies, and the fact that I am a part of an immigrant population,
Mm.
but I'm generations born in Jamaica. My
Mm.
parents were born there. I grew up with it. I think of
Mm.
myself as Jamaican, um, but that visually was not the way that I was perceived once I
Yeah.
left the island. And I long for that sense of identity for where you are rather
Mm.
than identity for what you look like.
Yeah. I understand. But you know, it's in a way, I think of my dad, for example, is German, and
Uh-huh.
he went to South Africa after the war, after the Second World War, with
Right.
his family. but he has always been seen as German. Uh,
Right.
he has a strong accent when he speaks Afrikaans, but they refer to him, well, at some times as a nickname, the German,
Right. Yeah.
in South Africa. And sorry, this is Lily now.
Oh.
And my dog. And when we moved from South Africa to England, um, and my children were very young, and they couldn't speak very good English. And I remember Suzanne went to the little ballet school there, and every time the girls would make partners, when they have to dance, nobody chose her, and nobody really spoke to her. And then one day she said to me, why don't they speak? Why don't they speak to me? And why don't they choose me as a partner? And I said, because we are foreign, we are
Right.
foreign for them, because we speak Afrikaans to each other, so they hear us, and of course their English wasn't so great. And then I said, you must accept that they're not used to you yet,
Right.
and give them time to get used to you. And in the end they did
Yeah.
get used to it. And but it's
But that
yeah,
is the amazing thing about children,
yeah,
and what would identify me as Jamaican growing up was the fact that I sounded like everybody else, just what you're
yeah,
saying,
yeah,
and so I would walk into school, and irrespective of what I look like, if I
yeah,
turn around and I talk like this, I say, "Oh, what up, man?" Then all
yeah,
of a
yeah,
sudden they accept that you're Jamaican,
yes, yes,
and I can walk through different neighborhoods, and what protects me in certain neighborhoods is the fact that I can pull out a West Indian accent.
mm,
It's sort of like, oh, he's not Chinese from China, he's Chinese from the West Indies, because
yeah,
most West Indian islands recognize what we call the shopkeepers.
oh, I see,
Historically, the
yeah,
the Chinese that emigrated to the West Indies
mm,
often kept shops, so
oh,
they
I
were known as
see,
the shopkeepers.
yeah, yeah,
And so we fall into a certain trope and category within that,
mm,
but we were recognized as being native to the culture. We were recognized as
oh, I
being a
see,
part of the
yeah,
culture. But
mm,
like you were just saying, it is
mm,
how we sound.
yeah, yeah,
It's our accent, it's our use of words. Those are
yeah,
the things that identified us.
yeah. And yeah, but no, so now I'm a foreigner in Austria, because I also my German is terrible.
Well, I'm a foreigner everywhere, so I'm used to it.
Oh, Richard, this was so lovely to talk to you. I hope that when you come back to Vienna, that we could meet in person. That would be so lovely.
Absolutely. I would love to do that.
Yeah, two foreigners having a coffee. How about
There you
that?
go.
Yeah.
And hopefully we could actually sit in a cafe and do it.
Yes, yes.
It's
Hopefully
lovely to meet
soon.
with you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This
Yeah,
was
and
so nice.
Suzanne sent her love. She said I should tell you. Yeah,
And give her my love as well.
yeah,
I'm
she
so
enjoyed it
thrilled
so
that they're
much.
getting to perform again. I am
Yeah,
really thrilled for them that they're going to be able to get on
yeah,
stage again. Yeah.
yeah. Now that's a long time coming, and they're all very excited about that. Definitely, yeah.
Right. And I
So,
did read her blog about her recovery, and
oh, did you? Yeah.
yes, and
Mm,
that was really great.
mm,
I went through 9 months
mm,
during my career twice. I've had two major surgeries, and I was very fortunate to be able to return to my career as well.
mm.
But it's an experience that we don't wish on any dancer, but
Yeah,
at the same
yeah.
time, it is a reality of the profession. And so, I
Mm,
didn't have a chance to really talk to her, but just to say,
mm. Oh,
I
I will
so
tell her. Yeah,
appreciate that,
yeah,
and
yeah.
uh,
No, I
it's great.
know when she came home that time, and she was in tears, because of course she was still also very young, But then I said to her to just watch out. All the things will fall into place, and you know, people come on your path in that time,
Right.
and you learn in such times. I always believe that, you know, that any difficult time has its lessons to learn.
Absolutely. And there are very, very few people, certainly nobody I know, who has had a life that has been completely easy.
Yeah, exactly.
That is kind of what life is. It's
Exactly. Yeah. You see, that's why I'm on cloud 9.
There you go.
I escape.
I think your project is amazing. I've been
Thank you
looking at
so
some of
much.
the other interviews, and
Yeah.
it's wonderful. It's amazing, and I think you're right. Having this conversation is important, and
Yeah.
it
I
should
believe
continue.
that, yeah, I believe that somebody will sometime hear something, and it would be what they need. So I think this is why, you know, I keep talking about this, because I think it's also inspirational for other artists to hear.
I hope so.
You
Yeah.
know, this is what he went through, and he also, you know, felt a bit a difficult time and so on. So I think it's an inspiration for everybody, hopefully. Richard, looking forward to seeing you when you come to Vienna.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Take care, and thank you so
Thank you.
much for
You too.
inviting me.
And I saw one of your cats there in the background.
Yes, I have 4 cats and one sleeping.
Oh,
They're all over.
okay. So
Okay.
have a lovely day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.